What's up, everyone? Jason Brown here, the king of programming. We're back for another programming review. I haven't done one of these. It feels like a while now, but I'm excited to do this one today. This is one that I've had on my list for a very long time, but to be honest with you guys, it's been hard to decide where to actually review this program from, as well as to look at variations of this program. There's a lot of them. So without further ado, today we're looking at 531 from Jim Wendler. If you guys don't know who Jim Wendler is, first of all, he is a legend, number one. Number two, I would say I've learned a fair amount of what I've learned about programming from doing his programs. What a novel idea, do a program and learn something. I don't think I would be here today if I have not had the experience to train with other great coaches. Now, I never trained with Jim Wendler per se, but I've done a lot of his programs. I've done a lot of Joe DeFranco, Christian Thibodeau, a lot of these phenomenal coaches, Louis Simmons. They have helped me in, really understand how to write better programs, but really shape the way I think about a lot of these things. And I will tell you as a whole, if I had to summarize all of these great coaches, it is simplicity. They master simplicity. They don't overthink things. They don't try to overcomplicate it. There's no fancy, silly exercises. It is what you need to get better. So does that mean I'm gonna approve this program today? I don't know. You're gonna have to stick around to the end to figure that out. But I do wanna go through this piece by piece because I think there's some important things to talk about here. But I also think there are some things that we can potentially do better inside of using this program. And I'm gonna highlight some of those things here today because I have done 531 extensively throughout my career as a coach. And quick little backstory. I was 2009, I think, I was training for a deployment. And funny thing is, I was definitely scared about going into a deployment thinking I was gonna lose size, thinking I was gonna lose strength. And fast forward, that was the case. That did happen. But before my deployment, I used 531 exclusively. And to be honest, I don't remember if it was through buying one of Jim's books or from T-Nation. But whatever it was, I used his program and I used it exclusively for 8 weeks. Now, during that time, I had phenomenal results. Both my squat, bench, and deadlift went up. I don't have actual data points, but I probably have in some of my old training logs, believe it or not. I have all of my old training logs for my entire life, which is crazy, but I do have all that stuff. And then sometimes I refer back to it just to kind of, maybe spark some new creativity. But needless to say, I had phenomenal results from this. Downside was my conditioning dropped off quite a bit. And specifically what I'm referring to is my aerobic conditioning. Now, in the military, you guys probably know that being strong is important, but there is a bigger premium placed on things like the aerobic system. You are doing a lot of longer duration ruck marches, a lot of longer duration runs. And of course, I was never good at that stuff. I was always better at the strength and power stuff. So needless to say, I used this program exclusively and I had great results. But there are certainly things I know now that I might have done different. And I think that is going to be the thing that I bring to this today that hopefully you guys will stick around for to see today. So without further ado, let's talk about 531. Well, as the name suggests, 531 is a scheme in this program. So if you think about how this is structured in terms of periodization for the squat, the bench, the deadlift, he's got various schemes that he's using, and 531 is where it culminates with your highest level of intensity. Now, if we think about linear periodization, typically what we tend to see is an increase in intensity, but a decrease in volume. Okay, so we don't usually have both of those things go up at the same time. We usually have one go up, one go down. And that's how we're able to progress over weeks, months, if you will. Now, this program is a linear-based program, but Jim is really great at bringing in a big emphasis on accessory work, a big emphasis on conditioning, and more specifically, higher intensity conditioning, not the low intensity stuff that I just referred to. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. Now, there's a lot more here. I can't summarize this as well as he can. So I would suggest that you guys check out this article. I am gonna drop the link in the show notes to the article that I am looking at, which is on T-Nation. And I think a lot of us coaches have been doing this for a long period of time, got our start reading T-Nation articles. I remember when back in 2004, it was one article a day. I would wait every day as a young coach, 19, 20 years old, to get to read that article every day. And it was like a highlight of my day back then. And obviously things have changed quite a bit. I started writing articles in T-Nation back in 2017. And It's become a very different landscape now. But not to get off the point here, you guys should definitely check this out. I know reading is like a lost form of education these days. Do yourself a favor, read this article, read articles from Jim Wendler. That's one thing I recommend that coaches do, is they go through the archives of some of these greats, people like Charles Poliquin, Christian Thibaudeau. There's just such a wealth of information in here. So this is specifically the hard gainers template, which I think that myself I can identify with, because I've always had a harder time gaining mass. It's always taken a lot of work, a lot of calories to do so. So this is the one I chose for today. But what we're looking at here is, in terms of the percentages and how things play out in terms of schemes, very similar across the board for all the 5-3-1 variations. Now, I know he's got a recent book that's got a lot of other variations of it, but I think just for the classic, looking at the structure of this program, this is what I wanted to use today. So this program, if we look at this across a week, we've got Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and that's 1 week of training. Now, how this is organized is we've got week 1 consisting of 65, 75, and 85%. And then in this program, he includes a drop set where we're doing something with a lighter load, but for much higher repetitions. Now, this isn't something the way I've done it, but I think it's certainly a way that you could do it. So I think that as a whole, the main lift being the squat, is perfectly fine. And these percentages will play out pretty well for most people. Now, one thing I see with percentages is that there is such a difference between one person to the next. Then give you an example. I worked with an athlete that was a very strong athlete, and this was a female that was training to compete in CrossFit, and she could squat 90% of her 1 rep max for 8 reps. I don't tend to see that across a lot of individuals. Usually 90% people are 2-3 reps. For this individual, she could squat 8 reps, and I bet if we push it, she could have probably got it closer to 10. But needless to say, she was one of the outliers where she was very much, in terms of muscle fiber types, leaning more towards slow twitch. Now, this played out with other things in terms of her 1 rep max not being great, but she could take 90% of her 1 rep max and move it for 8 to 10 repetitions. So again, these are things that you have to consider. So if we think about someone that's using 65% of their 1 rep max, and we think, like, generally speaking, how many reps can they do? These percentages are realistic. And one thing I think that Jim Wendler does really well is he gives real world guidance in terms of, what am I basing this off? Am I basing this off my training max, or am I basing it off my lifetime PR? So these are things that can potentially impact the results of a program like this. And that's something that he does really well, is giving you guidance. Now, the assistance work for 5-3-1, I love, because it is super basic. There's no frills here. He's got you doing dips, push-ups, or dumbbell bench press for 50 to 100 total reps. He's got you doing pull-ups or row variation for 50 to 100 total reps. I would say 100 is probably definitely going on the high side there. And even for your press variation, for your dip or your push-up, 100 could certainly be on the high side, but the exercise selection is going to dictate whether or not that's realistic anyways. And then has you doing culminating the day with some abdominal work. And I would say that he continues this across the board for all of his days. But as I said, you guys can check this article out. So what does that mean, 50 to 100 total reps? Well, if we're doing a dip, we're probably going to be closer to the 50 rep range. If we're doing a push-up, we might be closer to the 100 rep range. Now, a downside of this that I have seen working with thousands of individuals over the years is that when you give them less framework, it tends to present more chance of them overthinking. And I will say that one of the downsides that most individuals say that are not getting results from the programs they're using is that they overthink what they're doing. 50 to 100 total reps can mean a lot of things. So personally, I would recommend going with something more descriptive, where you're saying, hey, we're doing 5 sets of 10, or we're doing 4 sets of 25, and then selecting the actual exercise so they know, because a dip and a push-up are 2 very different things, right? So I think that the simplicity of this is great. However, getting a little bit more granular might be better. And I think on the initial 5-3-1 variations or variations of this program, it was a little bit more descriptive in what he was asking you to do. I would also recommend getting more descriptive with how we're potentially plugging this in. Is it a superset? Is it singular exercise? Are we resting between sets? Are we resting between, doing after 2 exercises? So there's definitely some things that we should know there. And, one thing that I will say about 5-3-1 is that you're not going to have any frills with this program. There's only stuff here that that moves the needle. All right, guys, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate having you here and subscribing to my content. If any of this information resonates with you and you want more free value, I would love the chance to support you on my weekly newsletter. We put out a ton of free content. Myself and my wife, Danny, put this out. We write it every single week to curate a ton of great stuff for you guys. The link is in the show notes, and we'll see you on the inside. So let's move on to day 2, Tuesday. So today we're focusing on the bench press, similar scheme. However, we're not doing a quote unquote Widowmaker set, which you guys can probably guess what that means. It's gonna be something pretty brutal. And the same thing happens here that we had on day 1, where we're essentially doing our assistance work of 50 to 100 total reps. We're doing some, he's actually got you doing some conditioning work at the end of today. So I'm gonna come back to this, but let's just keep that in mind for now so we can understand where we're going with this program. And then Wednesday is potentially a rest day where we're taking a complete day of rest. And then Thursday, we're moving to the deadlift. Again, similar structure across the board, 65, 75, 85%. And then hitting our assistance work, so 3 different exercises. And then Friday, we can continue that same theme for the press. And again, you can guess where we're going. Same split as far as our assistance work, all right? So in reality, this is more accessory-based work. When I think of assistance exercise, I think of a movement that mimics the lift that we are prioritizing for that day. So in this case, if we're doing a press variation, maybe just a barbell overhead press, we could mimic that with another press variation. Maybe it's a press from pins. So there's certainly some things that we could get a little bit more granular with there. But overall, this is a really solid program. Now, I do like that he has the prowler work in here. But what I would say is that I would make this on its own day because prowler work is very demanding. It tends to be more anaerobic in nature, but depending on how you plug it in and how much rest is between sets will dictate the reliance on aerobic versus anaerobic systems. So that's something that you should consider. Now, these programs don't include any aerobic work. And I think Jim, from what I remember, has come around and is doing more aerobic, more steady state, cyclical work, if you will. And I think that was the piece of the puzzle for me that was certainly missing with this program. And when you have that piece missing, what happens? Well, 2 things happen. You certainly lose your ability in terms of aerobic capacity. You're gonna lose some of that capacity that you might have had before starting this program. The second thing is that you might not recover as well as you would like to. And this is a very demanding program that progresses over weeks. So you're gonna wanna make sure that your recovery is an aspect to this where there is some prioritization of that throughout this training cycle. But overall, I think this is a very, very solid program. This gives you a really good template of what to do and how to do it across multiple weeks. Now, if we go into week 2, you can see the percentages are moving up. So we're going 70, 80, 90. It's got that Widowmaker set, which again, I'm not super familiar with, but if we had to just kind of break it down in its most simple form, it would be a drop set where we're going for a higher rep set, in this case, 20 reps. The same structure with accessory work, and then this progresses. You guys can kind of do the math for here and look at the full program if you want to. So let's just kind of take inventory of what is here. Number 1, there's a very clear intent. Now, when I do program reviews, usually what do we see? There's not a clear intent. It's something on one day, something completely different on the next, and then it's kind of all over the map. Maybe we go into week 2 and it's like a completely different program. There is a very clear semblance of organization throughout this program. Number 2, the exercise order. When we talk about fundamentals of program design, which I have talked about, actually, I think this is the first video I didn't start off with talking about the fundamentals. The fundamentals are the basic things that we often forget about. Exercise order, exercise selection, sets, reps, and rest intervals. Those are things that make a good program great. And in this case, that would be the thing for me that I would like to see a little bit more concise. But organization, exercise order is on point with this program. And number 3, I think that one of the best things about Jim Wendler is that he is someone that has the real world experience. He's been in the trenches. And a lot of the guys that have been in the trenches, have the real world experience, tend to be great programmers. I actually see, if you go on social media and you find people that have extensive powerlifting or Olympic lifting backgrounds, they tend to be better at program design because they know that how things play out in the session might be very different than what's written in a textbook. That's what I tend to see with these coaches. Over the years, I started to take inventory of a lot of the coaches that influenced me coming up. And one thing that I saw was that there was always a very definitive objective to the program. It was always very clear. Exercise order was always there. We were always going from big to small, and it was never like ambiguous like what we were doing. It was very clear of the intent of the program. And I think that another piece of that, if I look at kind of what made up those programs, what I tend to see is anywhere from 4 to 6 exercises. I don't see 10, 12 exercises in these programs. And if you think about it logically, 4 to 6 exercises is gonna take you around 60 to 70 minutes to complete, depending on how long your warm up and cool down takes, which that stuff shouldn't take an inordinate amount of time. You should be able to get through that stuff pretty quickly. That's what I tend to see. And honestly, that's the conclusion I've come to in my own program, that 4 to 6 exercises checks a lot of boxes. So overall, this is an outstanding program. So let's go through the cons of this program. Number one would be being very clear with rest intervals. So for instance, our 65, 75, and 85%. Obviously 65% is a good warm-up set. It's not gonna be super easy, but it's easy enough where we're not gonna need to rest 3 minutes between that set. Now, as we climb up the ladder, 75, 85%, we can certainly rest a little bit longer. So I like it to be very clear to the end user that, hey, I want you to rest 2 to 3 minutes between sets. You know, maybe this Widowmaker set, you have a full recovery before you're hitting that so we can get the most out of it. Number two, I'd like to know exactly how this stuff is organized in terms of, is it supersets? Is it one exercise at a time? And I think 50 to 100 reps is a good rule of thumb. But let's say that you have someone that is a really good body weight ninja and they can crank out dips and push-ups. I would like to know whether or not, if I am that person that's a body weight ninja, should I weight these exercises? Should I use additional load to make those more challenging to fit within the confines of that rep scheme? That's something I would like to know. So I'd like a little bit more information about that. And again, just like to know how it's structured. So instead of saying 50 to 100 total reps, I would likely have 5 sets of 10, or again, 4 sets of 25, something that fits within that realm to make it a little bit more clear. And I would have that theme play out across all of these training sessions. Now, the other piece of the puzzle is the Prowler work is a great addition to this program and something that I know Jim Wendler swears by, but I would have it done on its own day. Or if it's done on a day that we're doing our more anaerobic work, obviously strength work in nature is more anaerobic, I would have it done for short sets with longer bouts of rest. So something like 5 to 10 second max effort sprint, and then we rest for anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes to make sure that we're getting the most from that, and it's leaning more on anaerobic systems, which in this case would be likely be more ATP PC system. So I think that is something that I would do to improve this. I think the other piece is giving the option, if you will, to do some more zone 2 style work. I've got a lot of videos on zone 2 work now. I think that's something that I have always made a priority in my programs, just from my own experience as well as with clients I work with. So feel free to check out some of those videos. But that's something I would plug in and give people the option to do on off days. And even if your goal is strength, performance, and just maybe gaining lean tissue, I still would use that work anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours total per week. You could certainly go higher if that's, you know, within the realm of possibilities for you. You have the time, you could certainly go up to 3 hours. But 3 hours, I probably wouldn't go beyond that, especially if your goal is to gain strength and size. So overall, this is a phenomenal program. And you know, I'm not gonna sit here and say anything else. This program has literally helped millions of people get great results and do so in a way where they're cutting through the bullshit. You guys have seen some of the reviews now that I've done, and there's just so much nonsense out there. I think a lot of coaches would benefit from taking themselves through this program and to get a better understanding of what's realistic and how things play out in the trenches, but also to get kind of a better lens with just practical application. This program will help you do it. And like I said, I don't think I'd be sitting here today if I hadn't done a lot of great programs from other coaches that are smarter than me, that have put out a lot of great content over the years. So this is an approved program. And until next time, remember, results are king.
Best program available on the internet today.
I think it's very difficult to find a trainer like Jason that...
Since joining Everyday Heroes, I feel like I've stopped working out and actually started training.